Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for another week of Crypto Journey. This week, we've got an exciting topic, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, and Stephen McCaskill, CEO of Dasset, will be chatting about that. Like always, we will encourage questions throughout, so please don't hesitate to type in a question. Over to you, Stephen.
Thanks so much, Julia, and thank you everyone for attending. Today's talk, as Julie mentioned, are NFTs, and we have talked about them in the past and looked at some of the data around NFTs. But we're going to take a little bit of a deeper dive, and primarily because I often hear a lot of negative commentary around them. And so let's dive in. This presentation is hosted by Dasset, which is New Zealand's platform for trading crypto assets. So before we begin, I think it's important to recognize that most NFTs are going to fail. And since the height of the NFT market around August to November last year, the value of most of the NFTs have dropped 80 to 90% in dollar terms. But just like any new industry or business, the chances of success are usually quite slim. And a good example, in the late 90s, there were 27 different search engines, but these days we only know of maybe 2 or 3, where Google is the biggest. And so the average failure for a business after 3 years is 95%. And so we expect these NFTs to fail. But what I think a lot of people miss is a big picture, which I'll go into, but also that we're in a process of trial and error, a process of discovery and innovation. And so a lot of people say, oh, it's a fad, it's going to die. I think we are seeing some fads in NFTs that will certainly disappear. For example, NFTs that represent a rock, and very, very similar. I think there were like pet rocks in the 90s or something, and that was certainly a fad. And so we are definitely going to see some fads come and go. But a lot of people get stuck on NFTs as artwork, and that's or as a digital picture or a JPEG that they can just download on their computer. And why on earth would you pay $100,000 for that when you can have it on your computer as well? And so I guess as a brief definition or explanation of what NFTs are and what it means to be fungible. Fungible means you can convert one asset for another, and it's the exact same. So if a great example of fungible are dollars. I can give you $50, you give me a $50 note. We've both exchanged $50, but at the end of the day, we're even. You can exchange $1 for any other dollar, and they will always equal the same dollar. Whereas a non-fungible token is almost like a monopoly, where it's unique and there's no other thing that can be interchanged for that NFT. And so I like to consider humans, each person is essentially an NFT. We're all unique. You can't really replace one person for another. And that creates our uniqueness. But this is when you can start seeing utility or use case in the real world. For example, recognizing your land title or your home title as an NFT. As digital representation, you can now move that asset, improve ownership and provenance, and do things with it a lot easier than what you could do if it was a piece of paper or a contract. And so that's kind of where we're going with NFTs. But what do we have now? So I wanted to actually show some examples of what people are doing that are kind of out of the box right now. And so we have a restaurant that is launching, which is, I don't think they're actually right in being the world's first NFT restaurant, because there is another restaurant owner that is part of an NFT group that enables people with those NFTs to access them. But what they're doing is issuing NFTs that give exclusive access to the restaurant, almost like a club membership. And so you have to have the NFT to access the restaurant and dine there. So it's being used as a membership. And these guys, I think, are going to be a year or two before they launch. But if you go to Australia, there is a gym where membership is represented as an NFT. So to go work out at the gym, you have to own the NFT, and that's the membership to that physical facility. Here's an interesting concept, and that is using NFTs to prove authenticity. And so there is a cologne coming out next year where there's a limited number, and you have to buy the NFT to get access to the physical cologne. And so somebody somehow created a digital representation of the cologne. And of course, because it's limited, you can take it into the metaverse to show that you have this clone, but you can also receive the physical and use it on your day-to-day. So this is one of the most exciting NFT projects over the last couple of weeks, are getting a lot of buzz in the community. And it's run by a UK artist, Damien Hirst. He's actually the wealthiest living artist. His net worth in New Zealand dollars is about $500 million. And he launched a project in 2016 called The Currency. And what he did was sold 10,000 NFTs, where you have the option of receiving, of burning the NFT and receiving a physical print of what you burnt, or keeping it digital. And so it was an experiment to see what people would do. Would they want the physical or the digital? And if you wanted the physical, you had to burn or give up the digital. And what we saw was half the people who bought the NFTs, nearly half, a little bit more, 51.5%, wanted the physical art, and 48.5% wanted the digital version. Of course, as you can see on the left, is the physical, and on the left came from one of the NFTs that are still around. And so Damien Hirst, as an artist, is doing quite a few things in the NFT and art space. So although there's a lot of negative connotation around some of the art in the NFT space, there are some reputable artists creating all kinds of different things. If you think about art, it's very subjective. It's really in the eye of the beholder that values it. You know, you want it, somebody might put something on their wall at their home where somebody else might think it's complete rubbish. And so it's really is in the eye of the beholder when it comes to art. But then I'll show you in the next slide. So here are some of the things that you can do with an NFT that makes sense when you start interacting with it. So you can prove ownership over physical or digital assets, prove authenticity, which we'll go into, show provenance. So oftentimes when you buy a physical piece of art, like a Picasso, you have to know where it came from, who owned it previously, and that helps along with authenticity, but may also help with identifying its value. And sometimes those records get lost when they're stored in courthouses, stored as contracts, and it's easy to counterfeit or manipulate. Same thing with homes. You can see who owned that home in the past once the homes become NFTs. You can fractionalize ownership. So once every Picasso becomes an NFT in terms of its ownership, you can fractionalize it, enable hundreds or thousands of people to own a work of art or have access to certain investments that they wouldn't have access to before. Borrowing and lending. So the NFTs, because they're digital, they're programmable. So you can plug it into decentralized finance. You can acquire a loan or provide your NFT as collateral. So that'll make things like getting mortgages a lot more frictionless. You can do it with a few clicks of a button once you have a home as an NFT. Accessing software or licensing. This is a big problem or has historically been because of pirating, people using stolen software licenses, duplicating software licenses, and also creates a poor user experience. If you have to enter in a long number or copy paste a long number, now you can have something like a gaming asset that can be interchanged as the license to access that game or that software. Same with music. It's a little bit more interchangeable, where with music, it's also enabling improved intellectual property, where if you look at something like Spotify, Spotify takes 80% and the musicians get 20%. By enabling the musicians to create music and license it through NFTs, you flip it on its head where musicians can have direct access to their customers and can capture 80% of the value rather than the middleman. Voting, so NFTs, because they're programmable, can be used to vote or help make decisions in a community. Something else that's really exciting are domain names. Being able to, right now, domain names are centralized. One entity in the world manages most of the domain names. And so it enables things like censorship, where now as an NFT, you can own domain names. And this is actually a really hot topic recently, where you can buy something and a .eth address. So rather than having a long crypto address, which is really hard, you can't even remember it, you have to copy paste it, you can have a easy to remember domain name. And so Dasset has one, dassetwallet.eth, that we have as a demo wallet. So you don't have to enter in this long string, you can enter it there. And so we're seeing a lot of domain names going for millions of dollars over the last few months. So like Coca-Cola.eth or Vans.eth and different domain names are going for a substantial amount of money because these brands are buying them up. So this is where people start getting confused. They see this image, they see it's 150,000 US, about 250,000 New Zealand dollars for a JPEG, for an image. Is that really what they're buying? And so that's what confuses or I think people start becoming extremely skeptical. And I would like to reposition this idea that you're not buying this funny picture of a monkey. What you're buying is access. You're buying access to investment opportunities, to like-minded people, to a social media network, and experiences. And a good example, the Bored Ape Yacht Club has members that include investment banks such as Goldman Sachs, Citibank, has some of the oldest cryptocurrency enthusiasts that are members. So people who've been in cryptocurrency for 10 plus years. You have celebrities and artists such as Madonna or U2 that own these NFTs. And so you have access to that creativity, that mix of investors, entrepreneurs, creatives. And so that is really what you are paying for. You're paying for that direct access to those people as opposed to paying for an image. So what we're seeing is that they are enabling decentralized communities where you don't have to give all your data to Facebook. You don't have to share your data with Twitter. You can if you want. A lot of people in the NFT space are on Twitter, but this is really a big area that of what they're enabling. And so celebrities are issuing NFTs where that ownership of the NFT proves that you are interested in that person or subject and gives you access to that person. So you get an hour hanging out with your favorite celebrity, which fans would never have had before. And it also signals to brands the people who are most interested in those, your biggest fans. You now know, and a great example, which we'll go into, is Nike. Nike are issuing NFTs, and it enables Nike to market to their biggest fans and have direct access to them. So it's signaling a passion or interest in a specific topic and gives access and creating what I thought would come in a different way, but decentralized social media networks. So in a way, NFTs are identities, and that's really important as well. So, and something else that I think is underappreciated are multimedia franchises. With a digital world, launching a franchise is really challenging. So if you think about a popular franchise, I don't know, something like Star Wars or Game of Thrones, they have multiple mediums. They have TV shows, they have clothing, they have books, they have physical toys, collectibles, the whole 9 yards, movies, that kind of stuff. And so they're owned by big brands that are billions of dollars in value, but those brands are owned by a centralized entity. And so they own the intellectual property, they own the direction of the franchise. And they don't really give their communities a lot of say as to what that direction is going in. And so if you look at a popular franchise, a popular TV show, fans will come up with their own storylines. They'll come up with their own ideas, and oftentimes they're not incorporated. How many times have you watched a TV show where you hated the ending or hated what happened to it? and a lot of people agree. And so what this is enabling is releasing, and this is a personal opinion, but I believe that one of the greatest resources that we have is our imagination. If you look at where we've gone over the last 100 years, from horse and buggy to flying across the Atlantic or Pacific in 12 hours, it's just been absolutely amazing. And that's mostly because of the human imagination, and that's enormous capital. And so when we look at these franchises, what they're doing is enabling the communities to have ownership over the direction of the franchise. And so these franchises are launching TV shows. There's a couple of NFT projects that have TV shows coming out on Netflix over the next year, which also enable access to products such as merchandise, physical merchandise, and digital merchandise. So a good example is a project that I found is this project called Gossamer. So it's a book by famous author Lewis Lowry. They're coming out with a TV show by Bronze Studio. Bronze Studio did Joker and I don't know, a few movies out there that you might have heard of. And they're doing a video game franchise. So they've released an NFT, when the NFTs give you access to this whole community. And I believe, I might be wrong on this, but I believe they're giving the IP rights to the NFT owners. So you won't be able to buy certain merchandise unless you have NFTs. You won't be able to help build the story unless you have those NFTs. And they're also building a video game. So with the TV show coming out, a book, a video game, physical merchandise, this is a perfect example of an evolution in multimedia done by a Hollywood studio. And I think we're going to see a lot more of this over the next year, but enabling access to brands and communities that are direct and a lot more interpersonal, which will help those franchises grow. And so we're starting to see a few big brands. Some are have been derived through NFTs rather than a brand that already exists. And they are going in every direction on every medium and enabling new forms of media that we haven't really been able to consume before. That's a lot more customizable, a lot more personal. So identities, I think this is going to be a big one. And we're only just tapping into the surface here, but giving artificial intelligence an NFT, which represents their identity, it enables us to understand the reputation of that AI. Should that be an AI we're dealing with, or should that be something we should stay far away from? And it's enabling the AI to engage and interact with other AI and with people. So we're just scratching the surface in terms of where this is going to go. But I think it's going to be pretty big. So pretty much most major fashion brands have NFTs or very close to releasing NFTs. So this is an actual Nike NFT, and it's enabling two things. One is authenticity. When you go and buy a Gucci bag, how do you know it's real or fake? Well, now there's no question about it, whether it's legitimate or not. That's huge for those brands and huge for consumers. In addition to that, it's enabling digital wearables. So, there's many different facets here. There is the ability for the community to engage directly with the brand the brand to identify its biggest fans, to prove authenticity, and to have digital wearables or wearables that you can take into the metaverse. And so there's many different directions that these brands are going in. And so you'll likely find your favorite brand has an NFT of some sort already. And so this is where we're starting to kind of see that merge or bringing them into the real world. I think this is why we've seen most of it derived in the digital space, is because there are already customs and norms around how we transact and recognize something like a land title. And that is a really difficult process to break. And there's lots of regulations and rules in place that have made it difficult to innovate there quickly. But this is coming. This is going to be a major value add, particularly in countries that do not have rule of law. We're fortunate in New Zealand that we don't really have to worry about whether proof of ownership of your house is going to be there tomorrow. But there are some countries like Honduras where that ownership is very murky, might be on paper, might be in courthouses, and that ownership can be confiscated by the authorities who are in charge. And that's happened in many times over the last 10 years in places like Honduras, where the government has just taken property and you no longer have ownership over it. So this enables people to prove without a doubt that they have that ownership. Of course, there are things that happen in the real world. And say you have a car title, you leave the car title in your car, somebody breaks the window, takes the piece of paper. Does that mean they own your car? No. If you take them to court, you can prove that you never sold them the car, that they physically stole it. And so that car is still yours, even though they own the piece of paper, or they took the piece of paper that says they own it. Same thing with NFTs. There's a lot of bad security practices out there, so people are getting hacked and losing their NFTs. But different courts are starting to recognize NFTs as assets. Singapore just recognized NFTs as an asset, I think in the last 6 months. And so if you have an NFT that represents your home title, somebody steals the NFT, does that mean they own your home? No. You still have the opportunity to go to court, prove that the home's actually yours, and attempt to reclaim it. So this is where I see a major merge between the physical and the digital. And we're seeing from memberships that can give you access in the physical world as well as the digital world, and unique experiences that you haven't really been able to have before. And a great example is here in New Zealand. Our geographical location makes it really challenging for people to come to New Zealand. And so we have favorite celebrities, we have favorite artists and comedians, but most of the time it takes 10, 20 years for them to get to New Zealand to do a show. And that can be really frustrating. Where through things like NFTs, we can have access to those shows as if they're right here in New Zealand. And this is where we're starting to see experiences in the metaverse that enable people to access creativity without the artists or comedians or whoever physically coming to New Zealand. And so it's enabling us to participate with the rest of the world, even though we're geographically isolated. So looking at the technology side of things, what the NFTs have came about through standardized software. So in 2017, there were some innovations that essentially a smart contract that created the standard for NFTs. And that was fleshed out through a game back then called CryptoKitties. And that through playing around with the software through these smart contracts, there became some well-defined standards for NFTs, but they're still evolving, they're still being developed. But the smart contract standards that are known are called ERC 721. Because most of these NFTs are on EVMs or Ethereum virtual machines, they run on blockchains that have a very similar programming language and infrastructure to something like Ethereum. Not necessarily the same security infrastructure, but enable things like using the same tools such as MetaMask. And so this is where we're seeing NFTs quite popular on Ethereum, but also Binance Smart Chain, Avalanche, and Polygon. Recently we started to see, recently as in the last 8 months, seeing them pop up on things like Solana and a few other blockchains. And so the tricky thing, I think, is metadata, because this is where people can say, gotcha, where metadata such as, so if you have this NFT, the standard, it has to point to metadata such as, if it is art, has to point to the image, the artwork. And so that artwork can be stored on a centralized server where the owner of that server can take down the art or change the data, particularly if it's like a gaming asset. And so this is where there are some challenges, because you can get duped into believing that it's centralized, where there are some technologies that enable that data to be decentralized. So IPFS is a decentralized internet solution where you can store data that is a certain form that you can verify later that that data existed in that form. And if, say, the company or individual who issued the NFT disappeared overnight, they took down their servers, they would still reside on decentralized data storage in IPFS. So there are ways to secure that data and make sure it's more decentralized than being run by or owned by one person or company. Web3, well, that's kind of a catch-all phrase, really. It's building off of things like React and JavaScript. So your website or your project can interact with NFTs or a blockchain, and that is still very early days in development. So challenges, as I said, centralization of metadata. There are solutions there. So that there, although that's a challenge that people can point to, I think that where the solutions are robust enough that it's not that much of an issue. But if you, because we're early days, if you're unaware of this and you see a new project, then it could cause some problems. Legal challenges, it's really easy for a court to recognize ownership over a piece of property through a written contract that is lodged the correct way, depending on what jurisdiction you're in. But we still have a discovery process around legal norms of recognizing NFTs as assets, and assigning that ownership to different things. So there's lots of regulation, compliance, and stuff that needs to bridge between NFTs and the physical world. But that's slowly happening, and I think it's an evolutionary process where we're starting to see bigger and bigger things become represented in ownership. So initially it was all digital. Now it's things like fashion, t-shirts, shoes. Now it's diamonds and certain things like collectibles. And so as you can see, it's getting bigger and bigger. User experience. If you are not a crypto native, you're not comfortable with decentralized exchanges, interacting with smart contracts, managing wallets, then it's not really as friendly as it should be. But there are some solutions coming down the line. So I wanted to, and this is some data showing where different NFTs sit. This was some time ago, so it's outdated, but collectibles seem to be the number one. Sports, didn't really go into gaming or sports. Some of that I think is pretty obvious, where you have sports collectibles, sports cards, that kind of stuff. And that's just becoming digital and gives you access to those athletes, that kind of stuff. Same with gaming assets. I think that's pretty easy or obvious use case. But we're seeing a lot more use in things like art and utility. I don't really know the methodology that they used here, so it might be a bit convoluted. Some NFTs can represent multiple things, but I wanted to go through some NFTs with you and some things that are out there. But before I do that, just wanted to see if there are any questions.
I have one. Can anyone create their own NFT? And if so, how does it create value? Like, where does the value come from? Would it be adoption?
Anyone who is comfortable with using a computer, has some crypto to release the smart contract, and it's becoming less and less technical savvy. So I'll actually show an example of how you can create an NFT pretty easily. And so it really depends. You can't just create an NFT and assume that it's all of a sudden going to have value. There has to be a brand, there has to be a reputation, there has to be promotion. And so somebody like Damien Hirst, who's the most well-known artist in the UK, is building off that reputation when he's creating art in digital form. And so from that perspective, it's pretty easy. If you're a nobody, then you have to prove yourself. Some of them are doing that. And when I look at artists attacking NFTs, the way I see it is something like classical musician attacking rap or electronic music. It's a new form of music or a new form of art that you're not familiar with. And just because it's new doesn't mean it's bad. Of course, a lot of it is bad, but that doesn't mean that there's not something there. So this is something I've just bought for myself. It's a frame where you can display your NFTs. And so you can buy, you can hang on your wall and show your physical NFTs. And of course, because some of the art is interactive, is three-dimensional, you can display that. So this is
What a
something.
great idea.
Yes, this is something physical. This is also something that's pretty amazing, and that is a phone that is used for holding and using NFTs. So I've just discovered, haven't really looked into it too much, but my understanding or my guess or my hope, there's actually 2 or 3 phones coming out. And the idea is that they have the hardware to secure the crypto assets. And so it's not long before you no longer have car keys. Your car keys are your NFT that is managed on your phone. And as you approach your car with your phone, it automatically unlocks or turns on. So really no brainer, I think, in terms of opportunities here. So yeah, so here's a new phone that's coming out. Looks pretty awesome as a phone, and enables you to show off your NFTs or start having more interactions in the real world. So those are 2 things that are products being used. Of course, here's Nike. These are $2,000 New Zealand dollar artwork that you can put on your token frame. You know, if you're a big Nike fan, which I'm not really a huge um, uh, shoe person, but I know there are people out there that are. And so this gives you opportunities to show off your interest in shoes. You can take it in the metaverse, and Nike has direct access to their favorite consumers. Here's some artwork, which, you know, it's all subjective. There is actually some art that's not too bad. And so different forms of art. So this is when I was trying to find one, the presentation, I couldn't really find a good one. But here's some art that's dynamic. So this is where you can start seeing, so these clouds are moving. So put that in a token frame, put it on your wall. Now you have art that is 3-dimensional. That's it's just starting to be explored and pretty amazing. Oops. I think this is the same thing, art that moves. And so it's a new form of art that people are only just exploring and diving into. This is Damien Hirst's art project. So half issued 10,000 NFTs, half of them were burnt and converted into physical art, and half of them were kept digital. And so I think they kind of give each other value. Having an art collection where some of it's physical, some of it's digital, it certainly helps create that utility or value that's subjective to those users. And you can't get one under 10,000 New Zealand dollars. Same here. Here's some more art that is only in digital form. Cheapest one here would be 2,000 New Zealand dollars. More art. Just thought I'd show some of the art that is out there, because a lot of people think, oh, it's just a JPEG or an image. And so some of these are famous artists, and you can prove that you have the original. That's what the NFT enables. So yeah, anyone can come and download this image and say, oh, now I have an image of it. You don't have the original that was issued. You don't have the ability to prove its authenticity, show its provenance. And these ones are, yeah, 10 grand. Same thing here, about $5,000 for each one of these, minimum. And then more art that moves. I thought this was pretty interesting. I think we're starting to see a lot more art like this, where you can put it up on your wall and it's always moving. It's always interactive. And so I'll stop there and let's see what questions there are.
I'd like to ask another one. What currently is the most expensive NFT in the world? Would it be one of the board yacht clubs or?
Ooh, good question. And I think it's all subjective, but I do
That was
know
the other one I was going to ask about. Yep, it's
this
around
guy.
69 million.
I thought it was there was something that
63
sold
mil.
for a lot more.
Oh, wow.
So I don't know, I might be wrong. I don't know the numbers, but in the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars. So there's certainly some um, artwork that's um, out there that's sold for a substantial amount. This is something, yeah, some art that moves, where you can put on your token frame and share it off to people. So yeah, good question. I'm not entirely sure. Might be a Bored Ape, but I don't know.
And what's the best NFT marketplace at the moment? I know there's a few you can buy one from. Say for a beginner, would they go to OpenSea? Which one would you recommend?
Good question. So how this works is this is a decentralized exchange managed by centralized companies. The website is managed by the centralized company. When you go and buy an asset, so if you buy, I think this is they're doing anime, so they're doing a TV show, they're doing comics and characters, and so this NFT is something moving, so people are into this franchise would be into this. But anyway, yeah, so OpenSea would be one of the best ways. When you make this transaction, you're doing it through a smart contract. So you have to have MetaMask, or I think with Solana, you have to have another wallet. Then but there are some issues with OpenSea. They have some bad policies. Their fees are kind of high, but I mean, this is where most people initially go. They actually have the ability to create an NFT on their platform, but you're using their um, they're smart contracts, so it's like if you are an artist that's creating artwork that's worth tens of thousands of dollars, you probably don't want to use their smart contracts or their process to create your NFTs. You probably want to do it yourself. And so because it is a standard, you can take the template, copy paste it, create the NFT and yourself. But here, so here you can upload your image, create a name. So you can create it by following this template drop down, choose the blockchain you want to do it on, and then create it. Freezing the metadata, I think that probably has something to do with storing it on IPFS. So you can store it where if OpenSea goes down, disappears, the access to the metadata would be like the name, the image, the description, the properties, that kind of stuff. So so you can create it directly on OpenSea. But some other ones that I'm more of a fan, I'm a bigger fan of, LuxRare. Their fees are lower. They distribute revenue to the token holders. So for any traders of NFTs, you get some of the income by holding the tokens. And it's more community driven. So LuxRare. And then there's another one, X2, I think it's X2Y2 IO. And they did this promotion of 0 fees for a certain period of time. So I'd say those are the 3 biggest in terms of competitor, or the X2Y2 and LuxRare are OpenSea's biggest competitor. But if you look at the volume, OpenSea is still like 90% of the volume. These new contenders recently launched. They're listening to their customers, they're listening to the community. So they are giving OpenSea a run for its money.
Do you see this? We have a question from our audience. Do you see this as the next renaissance with even low quality art NFTs holding eventual historical value?
Maybe some, and the value isn't in the artwork, but more the history. So yes, in some ways, but most of it, no. I think most of it will have a value of zero. And like a good example, and I mean, don't quote me on this, maybe they have value in the future. There's something called like Ether Rocks. Is this it? It might not be this collection. Somebody made a bunch of rocks and selling just pictures of rocks. And for me, that is something I expect to go to zero. I don't know what, oops.
What would you look for when buying an NFT? Say for the beginner, what are the things that are important to look for? Yeah, because
That's a
there's
good
so
question.
many, right? So
Yeah. This is where I think you should stick with what you know. So if you have played video games in the past, you understand video games, you might want to look at assets that relate to video games. If you love art, you have an eye for art, you're subjective, you think you have good taste, then stick to art. There's a lot of things that I think you can start trying to understand and grasp your head around. I mean, just looking at the Damien Hirst collection, he's a well-known artist around the world. So, and that's, there's some artists like that you can get your entry into. If you are into sports, look up your favorite sports team, look up your favorite, if you love football, there's FIFA is doing a lot of sports things. If you like F1, Formula One, Formula One's doing a lot of NFT things. If you like UFC, then check that out. It's a bit disappointing that rugby hasn't really caught on to the NFT phase with how popular it is in New Zealand. But
surely there'll
we're
be an All
working on
Blacks one coming out soon.
it. Yeah,
There should
yeah,
be.
yeah. So I'd say stick with what you know, and go from there.
Makes sense.
There's certainly music NFTs that are coming out from a lot of unheard of, but some of them are popular, or you might have heard in the past. So there's certainly some, but I mean, are you buying that music as an investment? Probably not. You're buying it to get access to that music. Might have a unique history and have more about like collecting records, but it's purely speculation. Yeah. And I guess anything you are buying or getting into, I wouldn't really look at it as an investment. It's more as an experiment, and you're looking at it to because you are interested in what they're doing. You're interested in that fashion brand, or you're interested in that music. I think that's where that could create long-term value hand in hand. People are into old cars. Well, they do it because they're passionate about it, but at the end of the day, by collecting old cars, they are also getting them as an investment. But people don't necessarily invest or get into a hobby like that unless you're really passionate about it. I think we're headed in a direction where they're enabling creativity, where some of that creativity might be coming from countries that have haven't really been able to put their creativity on display or access, that people haven't been able to access that creativity. And so it's unleashing the human potential. We shouldn't really be dealing with spreadsheets all day and doing things that robots or AI can do. We should be focusing on creativity and customer service and creating and pioneering, as opposed to clicking buttons all day in an office. And so as this technology improves, where we're offloading the monotonous tasks that we shouldn't really be doing to begin with, like driving or spreadsheets, to AI and robots, we can return to creating and pioneering. So I think this is unleashing or creating the ability for us to become more human in some ways. Yes, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
we have been talking a little bit about NFTs over the last couple months. It is because we do have some exciting announcements on this front that will create a little bit more of a interaction with your Dasset account that enable certain perks.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you to everyone for joining us. And we will see you again in a couple of weeks.
Thanks, everyone.